Hey everybody, it's Craig Syracusa, Walking Faith. I'm sitting down with my friend Mike Delouis, who a few weeks ago we spoke a lot about during the pandemic and the virus. And now Mike and I have been speaking off camera, offline, about talking about what's going on in society. So this is not going to be an easy conversation for the both of us, but it's something that we both feel is necessary. So Mike, I just want to thank you for sitting down with me and just being honest. I really appreciate this.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. Thank you for the opportunity to have these difficult conversations that need to be had. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, like I said, I've a few interviews. I've done a few on the subject, and a lot of them have been canceled, rescheduled, as we like to say. And personally, just posting stuff about what's been happening, I've gotten some really nasty emails from people, or in social media, and it's not going to stop me, and it's not going to stop this conversation. Like I said, I think it's necessary. So we're both aware of what took place. I don't know if it's 16, 17 days by now with George Floyd, the video, which we can get into as well. But I just wanted to really find out what it's like for Mike, or what it was like for Mike growing up. I'll give you a quick overview of what it was like for me, and then I would love for you to take the floor. But I grew up in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn, which is primarily an Italian neighborhood. I would say it was low middle class. My parents both worked multiple jobs, and my grandparents, I was very active. They were always over. We didn't have a lot of money, but we really didn't know what to compare it to. So we thought we were rich until I looked back at photos. But we never really had any issues with food, or, I was always felt safe. I had brother and sister that I still talk to. We lived in a nice sized house, and, went to church all the time. Was never really afraid of anything. Went to school, and, started working for the church, and now we're around the same age. So I wanted to just get your sort of idea and what it was like for you growing up in Brooklyn, since we're around the same age and both have ties to the church.
Well, a lot of your experiences that you're speaking about actually sounds quite similar. I grew up low middle class family here in Crown Heights section of Brooklyn. My family's from Haiti, so I'm first generation. I was born here. I didn't know what it was like to kind of feel like, okay, I'm not going to get another meal or this or that, but I knew that money didn't grow on trees. I had tons of aunts and uncles who worked and who mastered the English language. They became professionals, so on and so forth. So I had a great example to follow, should we say. I did realize, though, that especially when I started to grow older and branch out, that I was being taught that I had to be careful of my surroundings, being aware of my surroundings, how I present myself, how I speak, so on and so forth. Because yes, my neighborhood, Crown Heights, is predominantly Caribbean, you say, and there's Hispanic and Arabic populations here as well. But as the 1990s were kind of drawing to a close, there was a lot of gentrification that started to happen in the neighborhood. And the police officers that I grew up seeing, they were mostly white. Mm-hmm. So my idea of police officers mostly came from not only on television, which I saw they were mostly white, but, well, with the exception of Family Matters, Officer Winslow.
I love that show.
Yes, indeed. So he was the only one. But the officers, at least from my memory, growing up in the neighborhood, they were mostly white in the area. And then I want to say in the early 2000s, I started to see more of a variety of officers from different backgrounds. So, of course, just in my area was already a bit dangerous, to be honest with you. It was the area of the Crown Heights riots. And it was generally a poor neighborhood of some people who were immigrants and people who've been here for a long time trying to survive. So again, I had to be aware of my surroundings. I had to have a curfew, but we went to church. My grandmother had retired by the time I was born, but my grandfather worked as a porter up until 1992. So I would have been around 7 or 8 years old. And again, like I said, all of my aunts, uncles, they were all professionals and went to school, so on and so forth, with the exception of my mother, who was disabled, that my grandparents cared for. My father was not in the picture. And so I just knew that I had to strive for excellence because this is the cards that I've been dealt, and I would have to take care of my mother. And so I was blessed, but there was pressure. I knew that because of what I was being told by my family, only because of love and so on and so forth, that I would have to really be aware, again, of how I present myself, how I act, how I think, how I feel, what I say. To be honest, from that, and it hurts me to think about that, but I'd be lying if I didn't tell you the truth. I grew up because of all these things that I was trying to be warned about, like being careful of the police, being careful that, you know what I mean, you don't do anything that might get you arrested or so on and so forth, which you would hope that all parents would tell all their children despite. But in our neighborhood, it would really needed to be said because we were a predominantly Black neighborhood, and there were things that had happened in and around that time, during the 90s, I should say, primarily, where I realized that because I was a Black boy becoming a Black man, that I would have to be really, really, really careful, follow all the rules. And some of my peers did that. Some of my peers have not. And so I've had to kind of grow up with a little bit of a fear of not only my surroundings, but of those who we want to serve and protect us, police officers, which is terrible, but that was the case. And inadvertently, I developed this dislike of being Black.
Wow.
I wanted to be white. I wanted my skin to be lighter. I wanted bluer eyes. I thought I'd look better. I thought I'd look more handsome. I thought I'd be more accepted and more appreciated, so on and so forth. All the kids that I went to school with were mostly, of course, from Hispanic or Caribbean backgrounds with few people who were white here and there. But I have to admit it, I wanted to be white. I didn't want to be Black. You know what I mean? It made me feel ashamed that because I was Black, I had to kind of watch my back. That was something I know that I was taught in my family because we had to protect ourselves. But that was just the nature of the prejudices that my family experienced, and that they thought that they were doing right by me by telling me these things because they wanted to make sure that I survived past the age of 18, which wasn't happening a lot to people around me, you know? So that being said, when I went to college, when I graduated, I made a conscious decision to go to a school that was predominantly white. I went to two schools. I went to Buffalo State, and then I went to Plattsburgh State University because I was like, well, I grew up with Black people all my life. You know what I mean? I want to have like white friends. I want to kind of learn from them, this and that. But now that I'm thinking back with everything that's been going on, now I wonder if it was some way to kind of affirm myself or to want to be affirmed by a community that I wanted so much to accept me and to like me and to all of that. And so I went in and I learned and I hung out and I loved it. I loved the experience. But I always, of course, knew that I was Haitian. I always knew that I was Black. I always knew that that was this is who I am, you know, but I don't think I was proud of it.
Mm.
I don't think I was proud of it. And that has a lot to do, again, like I said, with my surroundings, my upbringing, so on and so forth. That being said, I'm going to fast forward a bit. So I graduated Plattsburgh State University. I came back home. I became a nurse, so on and so forth. It wasn't until 2000, I think it was 2012 or 2013, the movie The Butler came out by Lee Daniels.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw the movie and it kind of got me thinking, who am I? Who am I? You know, here I was, someone who the majority of my friends are actually white. Of course, I have some Black friends, of course, you know, but the majority, I just want to say that. But the majority of my friends, I realized were white. I went to a church that was predominantly white. My church, college and church, because of the area where it was predominantly white college. Of course, a good sprinkling of Caribbean people in there who shared their faith. And I started looking at that movie, and I was like, really, who am I? Who am I? You know, I can't be, upset about being Black, but once it's a West Indian Day parade, or so on and so forth, I'm proudly waving my Haitian flag and this and that, because it was like a conflict. There was a conflict that was going on inside of me. And I know I'm so proud of being Haitian. I've always known that I was Haitian, so on and so forth. But I wasn't always proud to, I guess, lift up that heritage as much, because we were made fun of and this and that and all the stereotypes that was associated with Haitian immigrant families and so on and so forth. So I decided to do a DNA test. And my grandparents had always talked about our heritage and so on and so forth, that yes, we are Black and everything like that, but we have French ancestry. My great-great-grandparents were white. All these things that were being spoken about, all the stories that I used to hear. And I did the DNA test, and I was amazed by what I found. My Y chromosome goes straight to Europe. So on my father's line directly, I'm descended from a white man. On my mother's side, of course, descended from an African woman. And I found I was part Native American. I said, wow, look at that.
Wow.
All of that makes up who I am. 83%, though, is sub-Saharan African, primarily from Nigeria, Ghana. And I started to look at that, and I started to kind of really embrace it. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's me. That's me. And I started to realize that I had people who stood on auction blocks, who survived the boat ride from hell, who were whipped and tortured and suffered horrors unimaginable. And they were strong enough to survive all of that so that I could be here today. That's how important I am. Maya Angelou actually pointed that out in one of her talks that I had listened to a few years ago. And I said, oh my gosh, that's how important I am. That's how loved I am. That's how treasured I am. That my ancestors survived all of that so that I could be here today. So I started to slowly start to love more and more my Black heritage, my Black culture. Of course, I still get flack because of the way that I talk, you know what I mean? Some people, I'm just being frank here, some people in my neighborhood will say that, hey, you talk white. I'm like, what? So like, you mean I'm being articulate? But that's just the nature of how my neighborhood is, and how it was as well. And of course, I still have certain mannerisms, so on and so forth, that most people would deem not part of the African-American community. And so if you act like I do, speak like I do, so on and so forth, oh, you must not be proud of your Blackness, this and that. And so I've had to grow up with all of that, But I can tell you today that I'm still learning, that I'm still growing, that I'm still healing, that I'm incredibly proud to be Haitian American of African descent. I'm proud to be descended from a country who defeated the French on their own, the first Black Republic. I'm proud that my ancestors were part of that fight and that they serve as my models today when the going gets tough, when I feel like giving up, when I feel like there's no hope, so on and so forth. I remember that 200 and change years ago, I forget, 216, I believe, I had ancestors that did everything they could to liberate themselves. And that's who I'm descended from. And they were Black. Mm. And that's how much I was loved. That's how much that they thought of themselves, that they said, we're not going to take this anymore. And so that's been my experience. I'm sure I've left some things out, but that's been my experience.
That's what a story. Just a couple things. Have you ever shared this with anyone? And then when you were in school, or when you came to this realization that, after watching the film, did you look back and did you have any regrets to say that, because to fit into a crowd, regardless of what color it is, and I mean, even myself growing up, I didn't always fit in because I had I knew whatever the guys I was hanging out with, it was not where I was called to be. So I never felt comfortable. I never tried to adjust or become a chameleon. I just didn't fit in. until I got older, I realized I'm blessed and I'm grateful that I never fit into that crowd. But did you ever have to sort of adjust your behavior and your mannerisms just to fit into that crowd? Or
Yes.
you just might?
Yes. Yes. Because of course, I mean, I'm not gonna lie here and tell you that I was the most confident person already. So the fact that I had all of these feelings inside about my appearance, about what I thought about my not being proud of being black. You know what I mean? Not wanting to be black because of everything that was going on with the racial tension, with everything that's been associated with black people. Of course, I wanted to make sure that I wasn't the example for what people saw on television, media, and our music, and so on and so forth. You know, here I was, a young black man who liked classical music, who sang classical music, who was Catholic. You know what I mean? You know, a lot of people don't know about black Catholics a lot, and you know what I mean? And so, of course, it was something that I had to be conscious of, which it really makes me sad, but it's just part of the experience. I just didn't know any better. I didn't know any better.
Have you changed now that I mean, do you still like everything you liked back then?
Yeah, of course. I still, I mean, listen, it's part of me. The thing is, you know that I'm black. Not only do I mention it, I probably say it. I talk about it. I try to have conversations with people about it. I mean, listen, I have white Delouis cousins. My last name is Delouis. I have white Delouis cousins. And I talk about it. I always get a kick, you know, when I'm with them and I'm introducing them to my friends and everything. Like, you guys are family? How? It's always so amazing. So it's like I definitely big it up. I have my Haitian flag. I enjoy more the West Indian Day parades and so on and so forth. The cultural days, Haitian Flag Day, our cuisine, which I think is bar none. So that being said, I've had to really, really learn and do a lot of work and still do work. And still do work.
And then you mentioned too about, you know, living in the community and sort of having white friends. And were you accepted, or are you still accepted within the black community? Because like you said you like classical music, or sometimes they criticize you for the way you speak.
Well, I mean, I guess you would call it teasing, because I guess I'm supposed to be like, yo, son, what's going on? Like, that would be the way that I think most people would expect me to sound, unfortunately. I haven't, to be honest with you, I don't know if maybe it's something that I've kind of blocked out a bit. I do remember being made fun of because of the way that I spoke, and because that once I left high school, once I left the New York City area for college, that my friends mostly became white. And that a lot of that could be just the area that I was, but maybe, like I said, subconsciously, that's what I kind of gravitated to, because I was dealing with my own identity as being a black man, and I just didn't want anybody to think negative of me, you know? Yeah. So from the black community, I would say from my family, I think every now and then my cousins would be like, "Oh, your friends are white. Like, where are your black friends at? Where are this and that?" That's why.
Or you don't like specific movies or TV shows.
There you go. But no, I mean, I don't know if it ever got that deep. It didn't get that deep with me. I just enjoyed movies. I enjoyed movies, and so on and so forth. But I could tell you that hip hop wasn't really big, or wasn't really allowed much in my house. I would hear it, I would love it. And I grew up on Biggie Smalls, Tupac, during that era, a little bit of Nelly towards the college years. But it wasn't something that was really allowed in my house, because my grandparents didn't like that type of music. So if I had to hear it, I had to hear it outside. So I didn't really have it's fair to say I didn't really have a strong basis in a lot of things that were black culture outside of my home, except from what I grew up with all around me.
And then you said two things earlier, which I wanted to go back. You said about your family would tell you to be safe and to sort of follow the rules. If you can elaborate on that, what rules you're referring to, and how to be safe. But then also you said your dad, did he pass away? You said he wasn't in the picture. What would you mean by that?
My father was not in the picture from even before birth.
Okay.
To be honest with you. So of course already I was thinking to myself, oh, look, I fulfill a statistic. You know what I mean? I'm a fatherless son, again, in the black community, that's something that is always kind of placed on us. Like, oh, look at that absentee father, single mothers, this, that, all that. So I had that experience. I had my grandparents who were my parents, but I didn't have like a nuclear family, which always seemed to be something that was always placed as a stereotype in Black families. I'm sorry, can you repeat?
Well, one thing on that, and it is a very high statistic, and I think it's around 74%. And I'm not an expert at all, but obviously slavery itself has an effect on everyone. Racism has an effect in society, and they do say that it's in the DNA the same way the Holocaust, the same way. So it is part of your DNA. It's something that we have to break the cycle. So I don't think, in a sense, it's, I don't want to say like there's a reason why it's 75%, and it's not something that you've done, that your father did. It's just something that's within your DNA based on slavery. The question that I asked you was about, what did you said your grandparents or your family taught you to, to follow certain rules and to be safe? What did you mean by that?
Well, in general, I mean, I grew up in a neighborhood that at the time wasn't really gentrified much, and it wasn't safe. There were crimes. My grandfather used to tell stories about how people used to try to rob him in this area. There were just crime all around, people breaking into cars, people shooting up stores that happened all in and all around my neighborhood. So, of course, when I would be going to school, when I was of age to go to school on my own, of course, I was being told, hey, you have to be careful. I want you home at a specific time. If you see somebody following you, run into a store, tell them to call for help, this and that. Always make sure that when you walk by the police, that you always be nice, you smile and everything like that. You try to make sure that they can see your hands at all times. Make sure that you're respectful. Make sure you follow everything that they tell you. Make sure that you're good, clean, make sure you're respectful. Don't be mad at them. Don't yell at them. Don't do any of that. Don't be a hero.
How old were you, you said, when you were being taught this?
Starting from the age of 7.
7. So at 7 years old, you already had, in a sense, instilled this, I don't want to say sense of fear, but just, like you said, the rules. As a 7-year-old, I mean, I don't remember ever hearing that, to be honest with you. I mean, my neighborhood wasn't the best. I mean, it was still controlled by the mafia, so it was still these invisible walls, as I'd like to say. I think I was about 7 or 6 when Yusuf Hawkins was murdered in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn. I do remember as a kid vaguely when Al Sharpton came, which is a story that one day we can talk about. It was something that is interesting. If people want to see it on YouTube, you can see some of the protests, but so I remember that, but I never had that sense of a police officer, put my hands in my pocket, or leave my hands out, or be respectful. It was sort of like police were our heroes, and I was never afraid of a police officer, and never had to worry about running in a store if I was being chased. It was very different. So what you were taught at 7 years old, is that something that, like, if you had children tomorrow, would you still teach them that, or is that sort of you broke the cycle, or are you still afraid?
I'm still afraid.
You are?
Ooh, hard to admit that. I'm still afraid. I'm still afraid to a certain extent. I still tense up if I walk by police officers. I still get nervous and so on and so forth because I still remember what I was taught. And then, what I used to see, growing up, when some people would get arrested and I would be witness to that. Of course, I don't know what the suspects did, so on and so forth, but I would see those suspects be treated in certain ways that I knew I never really wanted to be treated, just in general. So I just created a huge fear in me. So in regards to my children, of course, I would have to teach my children to always be careful of their surroundings, to look out for their surroundings, to be very careful of those that they made friends with. I think that's just general what you should do as a parent. But of course, being that I'm a person of color, I know and I truly, 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 truly feel that we just have to be a bit more careful and a bit more mindful of our community and our children when they do go out into the streets. We do have to be a bit more careful because the thing is, it's just the truth. We are profiled a bit more. We are subject to violence, whether within our own community, which I can admit that, or outside of that, we are subject to violence, subject to discrimination, so on and so forth. And so we just have to be careful. That's the whole reason why I wanted to make sure that I was so prim and proper and I spoke well. And I let people know that I could speak a couple of languages. You know, I'm like, hey, I'm not like, you know, what you may see in the media. You know what I mean? I'm not selling drugs. I'm not doing all of these other things. I'm a nurse. I also have a bachelor's degree. I'm Catholic. I pray the rosary every day. I come from a great family, big family, you know? So it's like, oh, these are all things I grew up with. I mean, you see, I'm telling you this, and it even hurts me to say that. Because I know right now, to a lot of Black people and white people, they're like, what? Are you serious? But I mean, that was just my experience. Like, I knew that I had to be careful. And I'll tell you this, most Caribbean families, I'm speaking from the Caribbean aspect of it now. Most Caribbean families, you'll see that they tend to push their children to do well in school. Like when it comes to discipline, it's no nonsense, okay? You couldn't dare find me out in the streets and stuff like that. I'd be dead. But not by anybody out there, by my family. All I had to do was just worry about my aunts, uncles. I had plenty of people to get me into shape. So I'd be dead. And they expected a lot of me. And I'm thankful to my aunts, especially because I feel like I had different people in my family who took a role. My grandparents were incredibly strict. You know what I mean? I thought they were the meanest people in the world, but now I understand because it was a time where there were the race riots and crime highs. There were a lot of robbings and muggings and all these things that were going on. And so they wanted to protect me. Of course, it didn't help. I was a bit short and everything like that. And I was a nice kid. So of course, you know, they wanted to make sure that I would be protected and that I would make it at all times because they were an immigrant family and they wanted me to succeed. So a lot of immigrant families, you'll see that they push their children who are born here to be the best that they can be for themselves.
I would definitely agree with that. And now what's changed? Has anything changed? I mean, you know, we spoke briefly about the video. George Floyd was murdered, which I think everyone would agree with that. I know you and I would. What has changed since then? I think you had video. I don't know if it was video of protesting going on outside your window. So I saw a little bit, but what has changed? Have you had conversations like this before or after the video came out? Has anything changed at all?
I had conversations before and after. Because if you remember, it's not only George Floyd. Remember, there was Breonna Taylor before that. There was Ahmaud Arbery before that. And then just over the years, all the other deaths that happened. So, but this was the first time George Floyd's death, it triggered, I'm going to speak personally for myself, it triggered something in me that hadn't been triggered to this extreme. The fact that could have been me, you know, I could be next. And when I saw, because I still haven't watched the video in full, I've seen clips and pieces. I can't do it. When you see a man, regardless of whatever his past was, so on and so forth, but when you see a man with a knee on his neck by a police officer, and he's urinated on himself, bleeding out of his nose, struggling and saying that I can't breathe, calling out for his mother, or in my neighborhood they say calling out for his mama, that has to do something in here to anybody. And since George Floyd, that's a prominent death that's really, really stuck in my mind because of just how much it can't escape my mind. The hardest part has been to have conversations with those people, whether it be who are on my social media feed, who I know outside of my home and so on and so forth in my neighborhood, who are on both sides of the extremes and things like that, and trying to be a messenger of peace and trying to unite people and encourage conversation. Because the thing is, there are some people who feel that things have blown up out of proportion. There are other people who feel that not enough has been done, and it's time to break things down and burn things up and do this and do that. And it's kind of hard to kind of find a common ground. The hardest conversations have been with people who I know who are faith, who I've actually sat in pews with, who I consider to be dear friends, because a lot of times there's a tendency for these things to become political. Instead of looking at the actual fact that, okay, a man was murdered and there seems to be a high number of Black men being killed by officers who are not Black, by white officers, Hispanic officers, whatever the case is, that Black men seem to be the subject of a lot of deaths when it comes to officers in certain ways, and extreme police brutality. And I have a friend of mine, actually, if I could just vary for a second, I have a friend of mine who's a police officer. He's a white Irish cop, and he's like family. I call him my brother and everything. And he called me to vent, and he called me to tell me that, hey, Mike, I'm one of the good ones. And I mean, it's hard, like, everybody's protesting and they're calling me racist. And I'm like, you don't know me, and so on and so forth. He happens to have a brother who is Puerto Rican, who is near my complexion. And he says, so you have to look at both sides of the aisle here. There are great police officers who respect community, who want peace in the community, who may not be Black, but do amazing things for communities that have a high percentage of minorities in them. But there's still this issue that in our country, Black people are much, much more likely to be the subject of violence and discrimination from police officers. At least that's how it appears to me. It's been like that since I was young. That's why I always see. So there has to be certain conversations and certain things that are had, but those conversations have been very, 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 very difficult and very disheartening. And sometimes I just feel like, well, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do, because I'm not one to want to have enemies or want to hold grudges when it comes to that, because I'm a person of faith. But it's very hard to try to talk about your experience as being a Black man and feel like it's being discredited or feel like you're not being listened to. And I'm telling you, I'm like, hey, this could happen to me. And then they're like, oh no, Mike, but it won't happen to you. I'm like, well, why would you say that? Is it because I speak well? Is it because you know me and everything? I don't know George Floyd, but I could tell you this. What happened to him was disgraceful. What happened to Ahmaud Arbery was disgraceful. And those weren't officers, of course. Those were vigilantes. What happened to Breonna Taylor was disgraceful.
Horrible.
What happened to Michael Brown was terrible. And Eric Garner, the list goes on and on and on and on and on for the last 400 years. So when you try to explain that in conversation, to me, the only way that I could think of it is that people aren't ready to have that conversation. They don't want to admit it. They don't want to think. I mean, I'll be the first to say that Black people, we have made some strides, of course. We've made many strides, you know what I mean? We have amazing Black doctors and singers and artists, so on and so forth. But still, within our communities, still a lot of times the way I feel that we are viewed in society is that we're still not good enough. Still, our communities seek affirmation from those who are white. I tell you this, if you go to a Black church, at least I'm speaking from example, my early years, you know what I mean? If we had my church was predominantly Caribbean, Black, so on and so forth. And if a white person came to the church, everybody got excited because there was an affirmation that we were important enough for a white person to come to our church and to like our church and to be treated as such. And I said, what? I said, isn't that something? Because we should all love each other no matter what. We shouldn't get excited when, you know what I mean, someone from who's not from our culture. It was kind of interesting to see. I mean, maybe that's my interpretation, so on and so forth, but that's what I saw. That's what I saw. And I try to explain that, and a lot of times it's not heard. The conversations that have gone well, to be honest, were actually people I haven't called to have conversations with. They were actually people who called to check in on me and who wanted to let me know that I matter and that I'm seen and that I'm important and that I'm loved. And that's been something beautiful to behold because it showed me that people understand that there is an issue and they're willing to sit down and have the conversation. Not let it be political, not this, not that, no, but just let's talk as human beings and understand that yes, it's okay. We have differences. It's okay. I'm ignorant to maybe a lot of experiences that you've had in your community. You're ignorant to mine. It's okay. But let's talk and have these conversations because the thing is, what you see out there with the protests and the rioters and looters, and I'm not saying that there aren't agent provocateurs. There are.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to make that clear. There are. But the vast majority of what you see is people who are fed up. And they do not want to take it anymore. Those are people who don't want to have a kumbaya conversation. Those are people who don't want to do any of, because the thing is, people have been talking for a long time and the same thing keeps happening over and over and over again. So then it comes a point where you have to say like, well, hey, there's something going on here. Now, I would never tell anybody to go and do a lot of looting and all the stuff that's been going on, but I can understand why it's happening because people are fed up. And some people feel like this is the only language that will get through to make some changes. And to be honest with you, it's the first time in my lifetime with everything that's been going on, from these patterns of shootings and violence that's been happening amongst the Black community, that I've actually seen changes.
Mm-hmm.
I know this is a very long-winded answer.
No, listen, I'm sitting here and I'm listening, and you could talk as long as you want.
Well, I guess one of the only other things that I would say is that in order for us to have the change, we have to put our swords down. The swords of politics, the swords of white, Black, Hispanic, so on and so forth. We are all one race. We're the human race. God made us as brothers and sisters. We have to put it down. You can't be so scared of learning about something that might be foreign to you because it might change your beliefs. You have to be willing to have that conversation because we can't keep allowing people to die in ways like this. And, as the Black community, we've had to accept it. We've had to live with it. And it's hurtful. Because like I said, that could have been me. That could have been me. And I will also say to the Black community, we also have to change ourselves because we tend not to even be respectful of ourselves, I think a lot of that we learned from the plantation. You get what I mean? Because if you feel like you don't matter, if you feel like you're not important, if you feel like, we were property. So we weren't even valued as human beings. And we were still treated as such after, the Emancipation Proclamation. And then after that, the Jim Crow laws and so on and so forth. And all the horrors unimaginable, the lynchings, the rioting in Tulsa 100 years ago, the destruction of Black Wall Street, so many events that have happened in the past have kind of made, I think, us feel collectively like we aren't important, we don't matter. And I think it's time that we really learn, myself included, I'm including myself here, to really love each other, to really be proud that we come from strong people, that we are built of strength, that we are made for love, that we are made, we're so intelligent, so important, so vital in our families and our communities, and that we are enough. So what's going on in Chicago, or where we're killing each other in the streets, like the gang violence, all these things, it starts in our own homes. It starts in our own hearts. That's the best way that change is going to happen.
I love
So
it.
we have to start in our own communities.
I 100% agree. I think now, like you said, a lot of people, I don't say a lot, but there are people that are willing to have these conversations. And the fact that, we just suffered from the pandemic and in a sense still are, the whole world has stopped. And I think if this were to happen, and the pandemic wasn't at its peak, I don't know if it would have got swept under the rug. I don't know if we would have still had these conversations, but there's a reason that God allowed, whether it's the pandemic, for us to be still and to have these conversations. And it is time to just be honest. And like you said, the change starts within. And the one thing that I've been saying is, and it's like, we say, or I say, you're my brother, you're my sister, I love you, you're my neighbor. But then beneath the surface, like you said, some of the people that sat in the pews with you, or some of the people that you knew, they have a very different sort of viewpoint beneath the surface. And that's what I have a problem with, is that, you're my brother. I don't care what color you are. You're my brother. You're one of God's children. I love you no matter what. And when I see people walking down the block, I just see a person. I see a human. I see God's child. And I think we really need to just have these conversations and to be honest, because we are one race under God. And I mean, I don't know. I don't think it's something that's going to happen overnight, but
No.
I think the more conversations that we have, and like you said, it starts with the children. Like my son, he's only 4, but we're raising him in a way that he sees past all the differences, and I think we really need to just, it starts with the family. It starts,
Family,
culture is another thing. It's very difficult, secularism and culture, the way culture teaches us, but it starts with the family. So what are some of the things that we can do now? Like, what could you tell us, Mike, that we could do, some of the viewers that are out there? Should they feel comfortable enough to have conversations with people? What should they be doing during these times?
Pray. That's always the first thing. Always the first thing, pray. And yes, and hopefully in a very respectful manner, have the conversations. Learn about the community around you. Learn about the people around you who may not look like you. Discuss these issues. Educate yourselves. That's the educate yourself, because a lot of times it's just our own ignorances that get in the way.
Mm-hmm.
And that create a lot of these problems, our prejudices. You know what I mean? A lot of us just raised with it. That's just pretty much what it is. A lot of us. Can I tell you something that happened on Friday? I was in a section of Brooklyn in which a friend of mine was selling pizzas and everything like that. So I went to go support some pizza. My friend is Italian. It's amazing pizza. And again, this is Greenpoint, Brooklyn. And there were some people across the street who were waiting for their pizzas to be made. And they were talking and they were saying some pretty strong racial epithets. That were like, wow, I haven't heard that in a long time. And I was numb to it. It took me by surprise because I hadn't heard it in a long time, but part of me was numb to it. Why? Because I've gotten used to it. And it's terrible. So that means that let me know, especially how comfortable this person was with saying what they said, that it's something that had been learned, that they've been used to saying, and it wasn't a big deal, So we have to really educate ourselves and be willing to call each other out as well when you're saying something wrong, when you're saying something that is prejudice, when you're saying something that doesn't reflect the love of God, that doesn't reflect the love for a neighbor. And especially call out something when something is absolutely wrong.
Yep.
I think that's the best way to do it. I mean, I'm no scholar, but that seems to be the route that I'd be taking, because that's what I've been doing. So every time if I see something that's on Facebook and so on and so forth, I try to approach it in a loving manner. Sometimes I've been successful, sometimes I haven't, but I try to approach it in that way because I don't want to allow someone to just fall into the cycle of ignorance without pointing it out to them, saying that, hey, let's try to be a family. Let's not talk about this, or maybe it's not the best way to say that, or it comes across this way, or comes across that way. So sometimes the hard thing is just to be heard, and for the willingness of the other person to actually want to discuss these things and just be stuck in their ways. But I think that's the best method of action. That's the only way that I see right now.
I agree. I mean, as you know, most people know, I like to talk, as my wife
Yeah.
likes to overemphasize. I like to hear myself talk, but you know, I had a lot to say, but I just wanted to listen to you because I don't know what it's like for you to grow up, you know, in Crown Heights. I don't know what it's like to grow up as a black man. You know, I can read as many books as I want and watch documentaries, but I don't know what it's like. But I agree. I definitely think it's part of the belief system. The one thing that I just want to leave with the audience is something I spoke to you about, and just the video for a second, right? That
Mhm.
moment of hesitation and there are people that watch this video because I saw a reenactment, you know, where I live
Mhm.
on social media that it's just, I can't imagine how anyone could do that, and I really can't. But
That's terrible. Yeah.
the moment of hesitation when people saw that video and right away they said he must have done something, you know, he's a black man, he's a criminal, whatever came to mind, that slight moment. And we ask ourselves, do I have a problem? If you're curious if you have a problem, if you're curious if you're racist, if you're curious of your belief system, if you hesitated for a slight moment when you saw that video and you look to justify your actions or your thoughts, that's the problem. The problem is that hesitation, because the first thing most people, majority of people saw was someone being murdered, not someone that looks like what society says could potentially be a criminal because he's 6'6" and he's a black man. You know, so I just want people to look within themselves, because before you can demand change, before you hold a sign up, just ask yourself, you know, do I have a problem? Is there something wrong with my belief system? And have these conversations with people, because now I know more about you, what it's like for you to grow up. And I can tell my son, I can tell my wife, I can chip away at whatever is inside of me that needs to be left behind. So Michael, I really, it's, you know, listening to you has been so inspiring. And I'm always welcome to any conversation, anything you want to talk about that could just help inspire one person. Mike, it's honestly been a pleasure, and
Thank you.
God
And
bless you, my brother.
thank you.
Thank
And
you.
if I just leave one more thing. Um, just know that, again, family, we're all brothers and sisters in Christ. You know, if we are walking behind you, we're not going to rob you. You know, if we're walking by your car, we're not going to break in your windows. We're we're human beings too, and just know that we are affected. Our self-esteem is affected. Our, you know, as a black man, I should say, we realize that this is the climate that we live in, and I think this is a moment where we have to learn to love each other and have those conversations, have peace, so that our grandchildren hopefully can live in harmony and not live still with this fear.
Wow. Michael, thank you so much. Guys, this was truly inspiring. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you have any questions or anything you want to ask Mike, always you can reach out to us through social media. We'd be happy to answer the questions or concerns. But always remember, guys, you have the ability to inspire and evangelize through words and actions. And please take the time this week to just reach out to a friend and just get to know them, get to know more about their story and what it's like for them to grow up, whether they're black or minority, whatever. Just get to know who they are as a person beneath the surface. Michael, God bless you. Thank you so much.
God bless.